Hello, freak bitches. That's where it gets weird. But isn't this like life in general?
Yeah.
It's slippery.
Yeah.
There's. I mean, it's like we were talking about with abortion. Like, what is it? Is it killing a baby?
Yep.
Or is it a medical procedure?
Yeah.
You know
Can
what I mean?
we all just agree that it's both? That.
No,
I
we
don't
can't.
understand why there is, especially in this country, like it's so polarizing here. You
Isn't
know,
it
this
polarizing
is
in
not a
Europe as well?
debate. No.
Oh, come on, man.
No. Honestly.
Dawkins had tweeted something about it, that there was nothing, that's people, like a human embryo was essentially the same thing as a pig embryo. It was like some ridiculous comparison to abortion.
Look,
I was like,
the religious right will always be crazy about the things that it's crazy about. And people will always get offended on Twitter when Richard Dawkins tweets something that's unpopular. By the way, I have an interview with him coming up. If you don't, let me just plug, if you don't subscribe to We the People Live, then search for We the People, all one word, in your podcast app. I'll be talking to Sam Harris tomorrow, which will get released in a couple of weeks. And don't shout at me for not releasing it immediately like you did last time, Twitter. And
don't tell them not to shout at you.
We'll have some. Yeah, now
that's their
just,
right.
Exactly.
They have the First Amendment right.
It's true. I'm going to sue their asses. I'm going to drag them through court. And I'll be talking to Joe about. I'll be launching a little Ask Me Anything kind of Q&A thing. And so I did a live event with Dawkins.
He's had a stroke.
Post-stroke. He's great. He's fine. He's doing well.
Well, the stroke did not affect his cognitive function,
No.
but it did affect his ability to sing, which is interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Can't keep a tune.
Yeah, and so there are a few motor functions that I think
Yeah.
it's affected, but it didn't. As you say, it didn't affect his cognitive. So that'll be being released. So follow at WTP_live on Twitter.
Nobody's going to remember this,
underscore.
bro. They'll find it.
They'll find it. Weird people. Anyway, so what Richard Dawkins was saying is people are going to be angry at him on Twitter regardless of what he says. But I still affirm that in the States, the conversation around abortion is uniquely different from the way that it is in Europe and in Australia. It's much more of a fault line issue. And I wonder whether in hindsight it wouldn't have been better for Roe v. Wade not to actually have been decided by the Supreme Court that way.
What?
Well, just because, I don't know, people are going to hate
you don't
me
have
for this
a womb,
as well.
You fucking cisgender piece of shit.
I believe in
With
abortion.
your surrogate mama.
I believe in abortion rights, but I don't believe that that you can find in the Constitution of the United States a right so inalienable that the Supreme Court, like, where is it in the Constitution? The Supreme Court said there's a right to privacy, therefore there's a right to abortion because we don't want to interfere in women's affairs. But that presupposes that the embryo isn't a human. You don't have the right to privacy to kill somebody, right? I mean, if I go into a room, my right to privacy doesn't extend to me being able to get away with killing a baby. The question of whether or not it's a baby is the relevant question.
Right.
That's not addressed in Roe. So I think that it should be legal, but I think that it should be legal through the legislative process. I think that is a legitimate democratic aspiration for people to be able to. And if it means that it's not legal in Alabama because a majority of people in Alabama don't want it, I don't think the founding fathers would have a problem with that.
Well, there's a large amount of people that don't want men talking about this at all. That don't feel that you should be able to discuss this.
Yes, that is the problem. That is one of the main problems.
It's a female issue.
In
well,
America
I can
as
understand a woman being upset that a man with no stake in the game is stepping up and saying that a woman should or should not be able to have an abortion.
Well, why? I mean, how do I have stake in the game of whether or not, for example, murder should be legal?
Well, okay, this is not that. This is something different. This is
no,
someone.
It's not.
If there's
it's not
like three cells
it's a
in
moral
the body,
question.
It might be to you, but it might not be to them. If it's just happening, like, okay, here's the morning after pill.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same as an abortion?
I don't care because I don't think there's anything wrong with abortion.
Pregnant.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with abortion.
Sure there is. If it's a 9-month-old baby, the baby's in there and it's about to come out the next day, you decide to open her up and stab it in the head.
This is what I'm arguing for, is a kind of incrementalism, which you were just alluding to, right? It's not a black or white thing. Why can't we all appreciate that it's both? Because it's become so polarized in the United States that both positions are bullshit. And people on both sides know that both positions are bullshit. It's bullshit to say that it is just a women's health issue and has no ethical implications whatsoever, even if, as you say, you're talking about cutting a woman open at 9 months and stabbing the embryo in the head. It's also bullshit to say that the instant an egg is fertilized, that is a person that should have all of the rights to life that an adult should have, and that it's murder to kill a blastocyst that's smaller than the size of the head of a pin.
Right. It's
Both
very
of those positions are
complicated.
stupid. This is an incremental situation. Life evolves, it grows, a fetus grows, it becomes a human being. I mean, Peter Singer, the great philosopher, also an Australian, says that under certain conditions, infanticide, the killing of babies, should be legal and could be ethical.
Well, he's an animal nut. He loves animals more than he loves people.
But he makes a legitimate point, which is that, why does it make a difference one day after the baby is born? Suppose you've got a premature baby that's born, 4 weeks early. In fact, now we can already make babies survive at right around the point of viability, which is where abortion is still on the fringe of. So say you've got a 22 or 23, 24-week-old baby, not week-old baby after birth, but timing from the moment of conception. That could live outside the womb.
Right.
But the moment it gets born, it becomes murder to kill it. But you could have killed exactly the same organism with exactly the same future and exactly the same prospects and exactly the same life if it was inside the womb.
In
then
certain
it would have
states. Right?
Under
abortion.
Roe v. Wade, I'm not talking about late term. I'm talking about the point of viability.
Does Roe v. Wade state a viability time?
It's been interpreted as being like that 20 to 24 week.
But does it specifically say that?
I don't know whether or not that comes out of the actual ruling where they were writing it in Roe v. Wade, but I do know that is the way that it's been interpreted by lower courts since then. But maybe they actually spelled out the number of weeks. Either way, he's pointing to a legitimate conundrum, a sort of moral hypocrisy on both sides of this.
It's a very complicated, slippery issue. It's not simple black or white.
Right, and the idea that we shouldn't be allowed to think and talk about the moral quandary of this because we can't have babies.
Well, I'm not agreeing.
I think it's silly.
I'm not agreeing to that.
No, I know.
But I'm saying that is an argument that women want to take because they feel like there's this unjust sort of male dominance on the female reproductive system.
Look, when I see a bunch of white old men sitting in Congress making rules against women, predominantly young women of color who are in areas that have the least amount of access to safe and legal.
Women of color? How so?
Because safe legal abortions are more difficult to obtain in places like rural Alabama than they are in places like New York City.
Yeah, but there's a lot of white people in rural Alabama. I don't necessarily think it's a racial issue as much as a poverty issue.
Yeah,
especially like things like Planned Parenthood and shutting down Planned Parenthoods. They're just going to affect people that don't have much money.
Yep, who are disproportionately people of color as well.
Disproportionately in terms of the actual numbers of human beings or percentage-wise?
In terms of percentage-wise.
Right, but the actual numbers of human beings, it's not.
Right, but you can understand how it would look bad if
you're
a black woman.
When you add people of color to that, it accentuates the issue and makes it even more problematic. It makes it more of a big left-wing progressive issue, right, that can't be argued against.
Do you think the optics
discrimination against people of color? Oh, don't want to do that. It's people.
Yeah,
it's human beings.
But do you think that the optics would look as bad if all of the old white men who were writing the laws were black?
I think it all looks bad.
I don't think it'd look as bad.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. You're saying that if old white men make these issues, it doesn't look as bad?
No, I'm saying it looks
worse.
As bad as possible. It looks worse.
Then if old black men were making this issue against all poor people?
Yeah, because old white men just seem to drip privilege because every single checkbox they've got going for them. They're both male, they're white,
this is
and
a
they're
tortured
old,
argument. This
anyway,
is a very tortured argument.
I think you
Clarence
understand.
Thomas, you don't think it looks weird when Clarence Thomas votes against abortion?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so there you go.
But I mean, my point is simply, I take the optics as being a bad thing. I think the optics are worse if it's white people than if it's black people. But I'm happy to yield that point, to concede that point if that's a sticking one. The point is, we have to be able to have conversations about anything without allowing our identities to prevent us from being able to think.
I agree. I agree
the
with you
first
about the
time that I
conversation.
came on this show was because I was getting into an argument with an activist about whether or not I had a right to have an opinion about whether or not Stephen Colbert had been racist, right? And she was claiming that I didn't have a right to have a conversation about it because I'm a white man.
Well, that was just the way she tried to get out of the argument. You know, the whole thing before that was her not understanding the joke. And she didn't want to own up to the fact that she didn't understand the joke. And then when you sort of explained it to her, she was using the "you as a white man" thing to try to deny your opinion.
But don't you think it happens all the time? I mean,
well, I think
as you
this
just
is exactly
alluded
what
to,
you're saying. I think we're both on the same page here in that I think we both agree that you should absolutely be able to have a conversation about this. The question is, should a man be able to decide what a woman can and can't do with her body? And should we be able to make the laws?
But you just smuggled in the term "with her body."
Well, it is a baby if it's a blastocyst, and it is in her body.
Right, if it's a blastocyst, it's in her body.
Right, so that is a decision. We're talking about that. So when it gets to be an embryo or a fetus, along the way...
Somewhere along the way, it ceases to be just her body.
But an unrelated male human being, when should that person be able to make a decision? And should a male human being be able to make a decision at all? Because if you can make a decision about the embryo or a fetus, can you make it about the blastocyst? Like, when can you decide, and why should a man be able to make that decision in the first place?
Because he's got a brain as well, and we're all invested in
You're
deciding.
Talking about controlling someone's body. You are talking about controlling a body.
No, we're talking
a woman with a blastocyst
about
inside of her. You tell her she can't take care of that blastocyst and remove it. She must make it viable and bring it to birth.
We're talking about when a Homo sapien comes into existence. That's a philosophical and ethical question.
No, it's not. If you're telling
framing
a woman,
it as being
if you're telling a
woman's body.
No, because we're talking about the rights, giving someone a right or stopping them and controlling them.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a blastocyst inside a woman's body,
yeah,
and you're a man, and you decide, you don't even know this woman, you decide by your moral argument and judgment, she should not be able to terminate that blastocyst, then you are deciding what she can do with her body.
No, you're deciding what she can do to the blastocyst.
It's in her body.
Yeah, it's inside her body, sure. It's also inside her body when it's 9 months old.
So you're saying a man, unrelated man, should be able to have input on whether a woman should be able to terminate a blastocyst?
No,
that's what you're saying.
I'm saying that the democratic institutions of the state should be able to decide that.
I'm not talking about democratic institutions. We were talking very specifically about a man
what are you talking
being
about?
able to decide.
Well, if it's a dictatorship, then I don't agree with it.
Well, I mean,
I do believe that people should be able
to...
I think this is something that people ought to be able to vote on, yes. I personally, again, favor abortion rights. But I don't think that the gender of the person who is voted into power by the voting public is relevant in terms of whether or not the voting public thinks that embryos are human beings.
But you don't think that
I don't think that embryos have a right to life. But I don't think that it makes sense to say that an embryo is just the woman's body.
We're not talking about an embryo. We're talking about the entire process, right? The entire process of conception to birth, and that somewhere along the line,
what are you arguing? Are you arguing
slippery.
that if there are males in positions of power in Congress, that they should have to abstain from ruling? Should the male justices on the Supreme Court have to abstain from voting on abortion cases?
I'm arguing that it's problematic when a man decides, who cannot get pregnant, decides when a baby is actually a baby.
So should men not be allowed to vote for...
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying...
For candidates that are anti-abortion?
Don't you think it's problematic that a guy should decide whether... Like, say if you're a hardcore right-wing Christian...
Yeah, I've already said it looks bad. Like,
not just looks,
the optics is...
Fuck looks, man.
But what does problematic mean other than looks?
Well, it's not... It's a huge issue. It's not looks. It's a huge issue that someone who cannot get pregnant decides that another human being that they're totally unrelated to can't make the decision that 5 cells that have bundled together must be brought to life.
They think that those 5 cells are a person.
Well, they don't even know this chick.
I mean, you're just a lot of cells.
They don't even know this person. They don't know this person. Why should they have any power over this person?
Well, why should they have any power over determining whether or not...
When are they controlling a person's body, and when are they saving a baby?
Well, that's precisely the question, isn't it?
Right, that is the question.
Should a male have the right to determine whether or not a woman can murder her newborn baby?
It's a good question. I say no.
At least you're consistent.
Yeah. I don't think
what
that
if
you
the
should
baby's
be able
1 year old?
I don't think anybody should be able to murder a baby. I don't think a man should have the right. I think we collectively.
No. I thought you were just saying that you think that a man should not be able to prevent a mother from killing her baby.
No, I said that wrong.
Okay.
What I mean is no.
Because that is what you're saying with regard to abortion. You're saying that a man should not have the right to prevent a woman from killing her baby.
This is a very odd conversation when we interrupt each other. It's not going to work.
Okay.
I know what you're saying. And I know that you're saying that we should all have a stake in this. We should all be able to discuss this. I just think that when you talk about, like, especially like a blastocyst eventually becoming an embryo, we have to agree in some way, shape, or form that you and I don't have a stake in it. We're not going to get pregnant.
No,
it's a way bigger issue for a woman than it is for a man.
Yes.
So we agree.
We agree that it's a way bigger issue for a woman than it is for a man.
And we both agree that you should be able to discuss it.
I just think...
We both agree that you should be able to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean,
and you should be able to have this weird debate.
Where I'm coming from here is that I feel like we use identity politics to deprive other people of standing to discuss questions that are actually universal because they're moral questions.
Right.
And I think we all have... So one thing that I try to do as much as possible is understand where people who I disagree with are coming from. And I know you do that as well. So I am pro-abortion rights. But in order for me to understand where people who detest abortion are coming from, it's necessary for me to make the sort of leap of empathy and logic into their camp and see things from the way that they see them, which is that the instant an egg is fertilized, for them that becomes a sacred question of a new life, where it's no longer about the woman's body. It's now a moral and ethical question that we're all involved in because we're all involved in what our culture is allowed to do and who it's allowed to kill and how it's allowed to kill them. So it becomes a bit more like a death penalty question, where you might say, well, I'm never going to be up for the death penalty because I'm never going to do anything that would put me on death row. So what standing do I have to be in favor or against the death penalty? That's sort of a moot question. Like, we're all in this society together. We all have to figure out what's right and wrong. And if we've got a brain, we should have conversations about what's good or bad. And the fact that I'm unlikely to be in a specific scenario doesn't actually really give me less standing to have a conversation about it, or even to write laws about it if people vote me into a position where I can write laws about it.
Well, I certainly think it does when you're talking about a blastocyst. I certainly think it does when you talk about the argument of conception and when something becomes alive. So let me ask you this. When do you think abortion should be legal? Do you think it should be legal up to 9 months, or do you think there should be a cutoff period?
I think it should basically be legal all the way up to 9 months, and I probably agree with Peter Singer that maybe it's occasionally okay to kill babies.
So you think, so you think that a viable baby inside a woman's body at 9 months old, she's fully pregnant, as long as that baby doesn't come out, she should be able to kill it?
Well, I'm saying even if it does come out, maybe. But that's because I'm evil.
That's so
weird.
Ridiculous. You
Look,
really think a woman should be able to murder a baby?
Well, religious people think that you think that because they think that blastocysts are babies.
I'm not talking about religious people. I'm talking about you.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that the process of going from an egg into a Joe Rogan is such a long and incremental passage that I don't see any reason why 20 weeks or 22 weeks or even vaginal birth is like the absolute moral cutoff.
See, don't you think, though, that that's weird that you have this like really rigid opinion on it?
I don't have a rigid opinion.
Well, you think that you could kill a baby? You don't think that's rigid?
No, because I'm absolutely open to being convinced out of that. It's just I happen to have read a book by Peter Singer about that, and so he's sort of convinced me. I mean, what you would hope for...
He convinced you that you should be able to kill a baby when it's born?
Well, that there would be systems in place that would help mothers. I don't think that it should be... I sort of agree with Bill Clinton's old framing that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Right, that you should have as many opportunities for people not to get pregnant in the first place, widespread contraception, widespread sex education, and that this should not just be a form of birth control.
Right.
On the other hand, if people find themselves in a horrible pickle and they don't know of how to get out of it...
You think you should be able to hit the baby with a rock?
We used to do it years ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
I don't know, Joe. It sounds pretty horrible, doesn't it?
It does. It does. But again, you can't get pregnant and I can't get pregnant. So
that's
it sounds
true.
People
but I
are
could
getting
kill my kids
furious.
After they're born.
They're getting furious at us right now for even discussing it because of the fact that we can't get pregnant.
They're wrong.
They're wrong. But you're right?
No, I'm right that I should be able to talk about it, but I don't know what the answer is.
You definitely should be able to talk about it, but should be able to kill a baby with a rock.
Yeah, probably.
Nah, probably
maybe
not.
when I talk about that I'll never be on death row, maybe that's how I get on death row. I'll end up killing my children.
It's so evil and unsympathetic and unempathetic.
Some people think that killing a blastocyst is the same, Joe.
It is, but you don't see that little fucker.
No, you don't.
Blastocyst is
so
like,
as long as
you would have to have like reading glasses on to even look at it at the head of a
So
pin.
as long as you put a comforter over the baby so you can't see what's happening.
I think what we're talking about is a really complicated subject.